Hi, we're talking to Kate Kerrigan here at the DLR Mountains to Sea Festival.
Hey Vincent.
Yes,
My
okay.
hat is better than your hat. You just say that.
Well, I will admit that. I think mine cost like €1.50 or something.
Mine was a bit more than that.
Okay. Now, you've just published, or recently published, a very interesting novel called The Dress.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a historic novel, among others. Yeah?
Well, yeah, it's kind of dual timelines. So part of it is set in modern day London, and part of it is set in New York in the 1950s, around the whole world of couture design and dressmaking.
Okay. Well, I mean, when you talk about historic novels, the character Frank in this novel, he is basically the same age as the state, the Irish state, and he seems to reflect some of the cruelties that were, occasioned to children in that time. Is that something that you were trying to touch on in the novel?
It wasn't something. It's very interesting that you've said that, because actually that was obviously something that I did unconsciously. I think sometimes when you're writing historical fiction, stuff that you know just happens to come out. So I'm completely left-sided by that comment about Frank. But I would agree with it. And I think that there was a lot of cruelty to the state cruelty to children at that time, and also really the plight of children was ignored, and that would be something that would have really been reflected in the character of Frank. But I think that that's it's really strange that you would say that, because it's just sometimes we just write things and we don't know that we're writing it, and that's why readers are so important to us, because they can come back and tell us what we did.
Right. Yeah. Well, okay, but if I can then just take without being spoiling the plot too much, or giving anything away. At one point early in the book, he is staring at a baby. And later in the book, we meet that baby again more as a grown person. And there's a very prolific interaction between the two of them.
Yes.
There's an age difference, of course, but it
Yes.
is that something that you're also trying to portray in the book, with this age difference that was often the case between married couples in Ireland at one point in history?
Yes, it would have been the case that, and I think it would have been less commented on, and less kind of pronounced, I suppose, commented on in those days, because it was really just a natural entitlement that men of a certain age would be attractive to beautiful young women, and I think it would be entitled to the love of beautiful young women. And even though that is something that still exists today, I think it probably would have been more common at that time.
Okay.
But again, it was just a plot device.
Okay. Well, sure. But they're always useful, those devices, you know. And well, speaking of devices, you took the title "The Dress."
Yes.
And is haute couture something that you're actually interested in, or was that also just something you used as a device? Or?
Well, it was quite interesting. No, that was something that I was interested in, and that was really the starting point for the book. I used to work in women's magazines, and so I had a certain amount of knowledge about fashion. But it was really something that I very much left behind when I started to write fiction, and I'd always had the adage, write what you know, and yet I had never written a book about fashion or about couture, or about the relationship that women have really with their clothes, the very kind of complicated love and interest. It's a very complicated and interesting relationship that we have with how we dress and what we're willing to spend on these things. And so I became particularly interested in Sybil Connolly, the great Irish designer from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and actually she's featuring in another book that I'm writing at the moment. And she was really the starting point for the research for the book.
Okay, no, that's interesting. The Dress was a very good title, I thought, to take, and it's something that you've married then to almost like a thriller, if I can say it. I mean, from the first 400 words you're gripped. You want to know what's happened to this child or this 15-year-old boy, what's become of him.
Yeah.
And was it difficult, structure-wise, to marry this world of haute couture with the plot, as it were?
Well, it was a very difficult book to write, and it was a very complicated book to write, and it took me quite a while, but I worked with an incredible editor, a woman called Rosie de Courcy, at a UK publishing house, Head of Zeus, and she was Maeve Binch's editor for 23 years, and she is an absolute structure goddess. She's incredible. And so the book was really written and rewritten and rewritten with kind of great attention paid to structure several times. And, in a way, what I learned from writing that book is that every book should be a thriller in some way. Every book should be a mystery or a thriller, even though the book is really has themes are centered around beauty and emotion and women's relationships with their clothes. And underneath it all, of course, it's a love story. Yeah. But I'm glad you made that comment about the thriller thing, because it really, every book should have that element of mystery and thrill running through it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then if I can just ask you, are you able to tell us anything else about the book you're actually working on now?
Well, the book I'm writing on now is called It Was Only Ever You, and it is a love story, and it is set around the show band scene of the 1960s. So it's quite a contemporary piece of history, but at the same time, and it's quite sobering for me to think, oh my goodness, this is actually a period of history, the 1960s, because of course I was born in the 1960s, and we think that anything in our lifetime can't possibly be history. But it's a wonderful time to research, and a terribly interesting time for women and for society, really on the cusp of the swinging 60s. So it's the late 50s, early 60s, and the rise of the Irish show bands. So.
Well, that's, if I can just go back to the dress, because that's also something you see in the dress. You have the contemporary world as it is now. Okay, they live in New York and London and so on, eh? But the origins were here in a repressed Ireland. And so there is a great transformation there. Yeah,
and that's what I think is interesting, is taking very contemporary themes, putting them into the past, and seeing the ways that life was very different. But what's, of course, most interesting is the way that our lives are exactly the same, and our interests and our passions are exactly the same as they always have been.
Okay. Well, that's great. Kate Kerrigan, thanks very much for talking to us.
Thanks a million. Thank you very much.